now that we have the footage from the edit and we also have the reference, we need to start comparing this to make sure that it is the correct things that came through. Obviously, we are missing some shots. I'll do that later. And so the first thing to do comparisons is on your viewer, you have an A and B buffer. This allows you to put two types of footage into the viewer to do a comparison. This is quite handy in different ways. One is I can drag anything from my bin into my viewer to see it and compare it. So for example, I could grab a shot and drag it into the viewer and I'll be able to add it into the B buffer. You can see that the A buffer is already used by the timeline that I have opened. So if I drag this onto the B buffer, so it's gonna set up with a wipe and it's gonna put the other clip in the back. Now, these two clips are not on the same place. So when I move, it's just try and match it as it can. And now we can see that I can see that, and I'm comparing obviously two things I don't really care about at the moment. And I have the wipe, I can move it around, and this is based on different options here. So I can change from here from, at the moment I'm on wipe and under, but I have different modes I can do by horizontal or vertical, and you will see how this becomes quite more useful in other cases. And if you're on wipe or on a stack, you have different modes here, like invert and add, which is quite useful, and difference between the two images. Obviously I'm using it with wipe, so I can do this, and this little guy here is the transparency or the opacity of that wipe. So I'll be using that quite a bit. So right now what I'm going to do is, if I don't want it with a separate image as I did it here, I already have my reference in the bottom. So if you're going to compare different tracks, at the moment, if you look at the A input, I have all my tracks selected, which means I can select a track here, or something if it is tagged, and I'll show you what happened with the tag, as the main item to be seen on here. Now, obviously on this one, it's showing me what I have on that video that I put on that B, which is this guy. So that's not what I want, so I want this to compare it to this guy. To compare it to that guy, all I have to do is select any track that I want to use to compare and press 2, and it will set up my viewing there. So let's actually put that back into under so we can see something, and we can see that it looks kind of the same except that it's flopped. So why is this flopped and why is kind of a completely different thing. So somehow my footage was shot or organized in a way that is actually most of it is flopped. They must have done something interesting on the on set to get me something like that. But I imagine that the editor flipped and flopped all the stuff. Clearly, because I use EDLs, none of those transformations will have come. Only if I use XMLs or AAF, I'll get that information in. So in this case, if I want to flip and flop the shot, I have to select the shot, and I can go into the properties here, which these are the properties of how I fit my clips into the timeline. So if you actually look at this, the footage was shot in 2K, and I'm on a HD timeline. So my clips, but at the moment, are set to match the format. So I'm resizing the footage to the format, and then I can decide what I want to do. Is it set on the center, and I can flip and flop that to match what I actually want. Now, this is one way of doing it, but there is another way of doing this if you want to. That is by not using the properties here, because I'm actually going to set this to disable. I want to have the full 2K inside the HD, so I'm going to disable how I'm going to set that up. And the way I'm going to do it is by using the soft effects, which live on this menu here. So I'm going to actually add a mirror effect, and you'll see how now I have my properties on this side on the conforming, and I can again do vertical and horizontal, and now that should get in there. Now, obviously, I'll have to add a resize because I didn't set this to the default, or if I want I can still do it to format, so it's going to resize it, and I'm doing the flip and flop separately. The only reason why I'm doing it with a soft effect is because it's more visible to what I'm doing on the shots, and I like looking at what I have there. Also because I know there is quite a few shots that I'll need to do this to. So the nice thing of using soft effects is the ability to actually clone them. So if I do Alt K, I can now clone that, and all the shots that I'll need, all I do is just paste that as a clone, and I only have to change one, and all of them will react the same way, which makes my life a lot easier all the way through. Now, I can start seeing here, for example, more things. So this looks like on the edit they have a picture-in-picture, so they are doing a crop between these two. And to do that in Studio, you have to do a couple of things. So first one is I'm gonna add a crop to this shot. So I'm gonna go Effects, right-click, Effects, which is the same soft effects. I'm gonna do crop, and I can crop that shot and very quickly cut that way. Now, my issue with this is obviously is not blending with what is below. So in Nuke Studio, if you want a track to be blended or pass the alpha to be able to see it with the one below, you have to enable it. So I'm going to right click here and go Editorial, Enable Track Blending. And I can blend that, and I can see the shot below. Cool. Now if I press W, I'm going to go back into my white mode. And the nice thing about this is you will remember all the stuff of what it was and which mode I had it. So now I can check that I'm looking at the same things. Now that looks like it's a different thing. Something around there is the actual crop. And I'll need to check. It doesn't look like it's the right shot. I actually have the feeling that my crop is the other way around. So if I actually do that, bring that guy here, that work? No? Ah, looks like I have the same shot on the underneath. Let's actually check that out. So if I press 1 here, I'm only looking at that one, that looks like that. If I select this one and press 1, I can straight away see the two. Okay, cool. So that is that one, that is that. It's good, so they are different. This one is the one I want on the right hand side, so that's my right crop. If I press 1 at the top, now I'm looking at the whole thing again. If I press W, now I have my wipe, and there you are. Now that looks more or less correct to me. It's more about this guy that is not updating here. There you are. So now that looks like it's the correct place. Awesome. So that is how I can start using my soft effects to match and compare with my offline. Now, it will be quite a long webinar if I go through all of this at once, but I want to show you a few things that I think are quite cool with soft effects and that are quite easy to set up. So the first one I want to show you is if I actually come around these shots here. So it happens that, let's take the wipe off for a second, that this is the same shot continuously. Is it this one, and that one? Yeah. So these two shots here are the same clip. So I could clearly add the soft effects and add the mirrors and swap it around and do the different things, which, yeah, is great. But if I have that clip, if we think we're gonna do this, this is the 60-second, but this shot is probably gonna leave as well on my 30-second and on my 15-second. And I'll have to redo all over again. So instead of doing that, there is something else I could do, is you can see clips so in different ways. So if I have that item here, if I right click, I can open it and I can go and find it in different places. Obviously in the timeline, sorry, I'll show you this timeline in a second. Project view, which means it's gonna go and open it here on my bins and find it on my bin so I can find the clip and do something with it. But there is also this open in timeline view, What that does is it shows that clip in its own sequence, for saying it like that. This is my source file. So as you can see, it is locked and I cannot edit it or do almost anything to it. But what I can do is I can create a new video track to add effects that will obviously affect every single version of that source. So in this case, I know I want to flip and flop this. So I'm gonna again add a mirror and I'm gonna flip and flop it. And then when I go back into my timeline, you can see that now both of those clips have an internal soft effect. So this is going to be really, really useful when you have a lot of shots or the same source file that has been added into separate parts. You can add it this way, and that way you don't have to have extra soft effects lying around. So if I show that again to you, so here at the end I think I have another group of those. So for example here, the main thing is that the editor has gone, and as always, shot without retime, I think, and then let's actually check that. Yeah, that's without retime. This one is with retime. That one is without. That one is with. That one is without, right? So the same clip 4 times, 5 times, 3 without retimes, and 2 with. So what I probably want to do in here is again just open that in the timeline view, and now I can again add a new video track in here and add that mirror, and again vertical and horizontal, and now I can go back and I have all those already reformatted and transformed correctly. So that was one of the tips that I wanted to give you. Now, just as I said at the beginning, when you have multiple sequences, as I'm looking in here, you also have multiple viewers. And the viewers have now the names of the sequence that they belong to. So just bear that in mind. I'll show you just a little bit later on how am I going to use it to compare between different sequences and grades and different bits and pieces. So for now, I'm just going to close them. And when I close the viewer, you can see the sequence closes. Or if I close the sequence, the viewer closes as well. Okay, so I have shown you 2 ways of applying soft effects, either on top of a clip or inside of the actual source clip. There is one more way of using soft effects I really like, specifically for certain things. That is as a track effect. So if I create a new track, I can add soft effects to that track that will affect everything underneath. The one that I really like applying like this is the burn-in. So I'm going to go into effects and burn-in. This way I can apply that burn-in through the whole sequence, and I don't have to apply it into each different file. Remember that if you press play, that will update on real time, so I can get the timecode, for example, that I'm getting here. So one of the things that I like using this is that I can set it up to have not only a timecode of the timeline, but instead of the track name, for example, I want to use the input frame or the input timecode. There you are. So now I have the timecode of my actual clip and the timecode of my timeline. And once we get into reviewing, the other thing I really like is looking at the clip frame, at the input frame. So then I'll know exactly, once we have created comps and everything that are already transcoded to 1001 and things like that, I can really see the frame that I want to work on, or I want to tell my artist to fix, or things like that. So for now, I'm going to leave that on track. The reason why I leave it on track is because I want to show you another bit and pieces. So when you have blend tracks like here, you'll have an issue with the burn-in. The burn-in will see what is actually the last track that is not blended. That's the data that is coming around. So if I disable this by pressing D, you can see that my timecode here is not changing. The reason why is, again, is this is actually looking at the last non-blended track. If I have blend tracks and I want to have that data, I normally add then another burn-in to that clip. So to do that, what I normally do is normally this is kind of my editorial burn-in, not my actual editorial one. And the reason why is because I normally set up, so none, none and none, and on the top I set it up to be the short input timecode, and then I have my sequence timecode, and normally I have my clip, hero clip. So it gives me my hero clip and where it is, and then I actually add a separate burn-in for the one here, and that one obviously now the top bit is obviously overriding, so I don't want the top, I want the top to be none, 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 and at the bottom again my input clip timecode and my clip and my timeline timecode. Cool, awesome. So I can see that those two match, and then I can have the correct one for each one of my clips. So in this case, a bit weird because the shot has the same timecode, and as you look, I had to do kind of a lot of faffling around with that. Well, one of the things I really like about this is with my soft effects is saving presets. So if I save this as my preset, and this is going to be a burn in, I like putting burn in, and if I put a dash, that creates a folder, and I'm gonna call this is my blend tracks, cool. So if I create that, cool, awesome. Now when I attach another soft effect to somewhere else, so if I go and say burn in here, and now what I can do is just go and load that as burn in and blend tracks, and it remembers what it has to be on, what has to be off, and straight away it's set up for me. And now I have both time codes differently for each clip and the same on for the timeline. So it's a nice way of checking what I actually need. This is going to be obviously quite useful. For example, in this case, if I compare this, that top track is really the reference for my for the animators to work on. So actually what I want to do with this is I probably want to add my crop, and I'm going to crop that guy out very quickly. One good way of moving on the viewer that I like is by just middle click and left click at the same time, and you can zoom in and out on the viewer. A lot of people don't know that one, which I'm surprised, but it's quite a good one. So I can crop that, I know that that's a reference, and also I should actually rename this track as animation reference. For reference. Cool. Cool. So I actually did something. See, I put my crop on top of my burn-in, which means I'm cropping my text. So it's quite easy. If you want, you can always change the order of your soft effects. You can just drag them around, and now that has swapped them. And I have those two the other way around. So now my text actually goes above the crop, so it's not getting cropped after that, so I can see that correctly. Cool. So actually, now that I realize that we have, let's say I have gone through and added my soft effects in different areas, I have matched all the shots or most of the shots. Now I want to kind of organize this edit. I have a mixture on this track of animation reference stuff that I need to send for the animation guys, but I also have plates here. So really, I have, these are really my plates, right? That's my plates, and I'm gonna say plate 01, so that's my first one. And then here I have a second set of plates for what it looks like. If I actually, again, compare something here with my reference, is what I have is the animation reference of the character, which is the top one, and then the second one is for the screen. It's stuff that we're gonna add into the comps. So that's a second set of plates. So which are those? So what I'm gonna do for now is take these guys that I think they are also screens or kind of other plates, so picture in pictures. These are the guys from that side. So I'll need to, is the kit actually. I want to kind of move these down. So there is two ways I can move stuff in my timeline. One is clearly by hand, so just moving that like that. Remember that if you put your mouse under that dotted line, it's gonna create a new track. So if I do that, it's gonna try and create a new track, okay? So I'm gonna say no, what I want is just to move that. But if you want to be more precise sometimes and not use the mouse or your, I'm using a Wacom tablet, which means sometimes my shaky hands play with me a bit. So I can always use the hotkeys, and a few people don't know this, so it's kind of nice to know it. Alt and the dot and the comma move the clips up and down the tracks, which is really, really useful. Obviously, you can select several clips and do the same. And if you don't have a track above, for example, I can always select that and move that up or down, and it's going to create a new track.